Hey, it's Christopher. I just want to tell you a couple stories about the internet back in '95 when I got on the internet. To prevent myself from rambling here, and I just want to set out the topic. I want to talk to you a little bit about what the wild, wild west looked like, or how the internet is different today than it was 30 years ago, and some of the lessons that I've learned from that, and what I'd like to share with you all. And secondly, kind of the evolution of what's happened in the world since the internet became the thing in the mid '90s. Um, okay, so let's get started. So, from New York, born and raised for the most part, and got a Windows computer at some point, AOL, and sure enough, there's chat rooms and software sharing. Some of us would call it wares or pirating, but it was sharing. We're trying before we buy these things, obviously. I tried Visual Basic. I'll never do it again. But I digress. What I'd like to tell you is how things were. Now, today, listen, recently, $10 billion was invested in cybersecurity thanks to Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, and a couple other companies as well. The Biden administration had a roundtable around this. It's a big problem, especially since we have on the cyber espionage front, we have Russians and Chinese and other nation states that are actively attacking us and exploiting our citizen and our systems. So that said, for example, in the '90s, it was very commonplace to find databases filled with credit cards for customers. A good example might have been the regional ISPs or internet service providers that were widely available and ubiquitous back then. You know, I myself use several New York ISPs that local here, a couple of folks just running modem pools and whatnot, and having the internet connection, and a couple of servers for email and whatnot, and Radius and a couple other things as well. Um, they were running their business on a MySQL database that had their customer data. No CVV codes at the time, it's just 16-digit PANs, account numbers. And yeah, there was a lot of compromises back then. And I saw within, as a whole, what was happening back then were just, credit card fraud was rampant because of this. And for the most part, I'm sure, and I'll have to correlate this some way. I'm sure in some way that there were millions of dollars that the credit card companies started to spend at that point because of the breach of information for credit card data. So that said, we can kind of establish when things started to change. So, like from my perspective, I saw things kind of growing and becoming very ubiquitous in kind of this wild wild west thing. I think I was 13 years old at the time, by the way. So my recollection is about 27 years old at this point. But in any case, yeah. So we had these regional ISPs. Now, what happened ever since then? Well, I could see around the 2000s. There was Windows 2000 was a big deal. It was like the first networking based OS. I come to learn later, working through with various professionals and learning from them, that NT4 was around for some time, and this was the ubiquitous software that ran workgroups for enterprises. And Windows 2000 was a big deal. So Windows 2000 brought in the Active Directory and a lot of the technologies that we're still using today. So I would hazard a guess that Active Directory is about 20-something years old as far as technology goes. Don't know too much about MT4. Maybe it's involved with that, but didn't call it Active Directory. I think they called it domains at that point, right? NT4 domains, LAN manager and whatnot. So in 2000, so 95, we see Wild Wild West. Linux was out there, Unix was out there, FreeBSD was out there. A lot of systems were being powered by those operating systems that had been around since the 80s. Windows was there, but I didn't see it as ubiquitous as I was seeing Linux and Unix in a lot of places. Mind you, Linux was only around probably since 91, so it was very, very nascent at the time. Red Hat 4.0, I think, was the first release that I recall that in that age. Now, I already came to